All right. So I kind of want to get into sort of like a almost like a decision tree, right? What are some possible ways this can go? And you kind of touched on that. So I guess option, the first thing that's possible very clearly is that the Supreme Court just doesn't rule against IEEPA tariffs and they stand. And is that kind of end of story? Is that the end of the road, or what
If
happens after that?
if the government says we're not going to rule against these tariffs, is that what you're asking? We disagree
Yes.
with the courts, the tariffs stay in place. They're going to have to say why.
No,
So,
no, I'm sorry. I meant, let's just make sure the question is clear. Let's say the Supreme Court makes a ruling that upholds the tariffs.
upholds the lower court cases or upholds the
No,
tariffs.
no, uh, no, they rule against the CIT.
Okay.
I guess they
Yeah, that's
invalidate
where I
the
was
CIT
going.
ruling, right?
That's where I
So,
was
yeah,
going. So if they say that, they have to say why.
okay.
This is so sticky. What the court probably doesn't want to do is give some sweeping decision about presidential powers. What they don't want to do is in some massive decision say, and here are the reasons that IEEPA can't be applied here, because what they would essentially be doing is determining precisely what IEEPA can be used for. And it appears from court watchers that that's not something they want to do. All right. So they have to say why. So they'll strike it. They'll strike down the agreements of the lower courts, and they'll say this is the legal reason why we don't agree with it. Well, what that does is it opens up additional cases. It opens up additional cases to say the reason that the court chose not to uphold these tariffs was incorrect. We're going to ask the question this way. Again, trade attorneys get
You're
involved.
changing the reason, basically.
The reasoning for it. So one of the reasons we don't think that we've got an answer yet on this is because they're trying to come up with the reason why or against they've made this decision. So what is the legal basis we're going to use to apply this decision, either to strike down the tariffs or to allow them to continue? So if they say we're disagreeing with the lower courts, we're going to keep these tariffs in place, tariffs stay in place until another legal challenge happens. And then yes, then having your stuff in front of the CIT and having that case done will probably have some utility. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see a refund on them.
So, okay, so the second option is possible outcome is that they do side with the lower court ruling and say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, yes, the president didn't have the powers. What happens then? I guess they send it back to the lower court, or is there another sort of
All
division
kinds.
there? And can they just say, all right, we're not even gonna send it to lower court. We're just gonna force the government
Yeah, the
to
Supreme Court's
refund?
called the Supreme Court for a reason, right? They are going to make a decision, and they can say what they. So they could very well say, we are we are invalidating the tariffs in the past. We agree with the lower courts. However, and the however is the scary word. It's possible the Supreme Court could say, we don't recommend or we're not allowing for refunds to happen. Just moving forward, there won't be any tariffs. There's a huge problem with that, a huge legal problem with that. If a tax has been determined to be illegal, you can't say that there's no do-over here. You were charged a tax. You were charged a trade remedy that has been seen to be illegal. Therefore, the government owes you some sort of recompense, right? They could also say, or the CIT could say, we're not going to give refunds. What we're going to do instead is we're going to give you guys credit. So for your future imports, you're going to have a pool of money already paid that you can pull from. I want you to imagine as a customs house broker what a goat rodeo that will be. You'll have to update ACE, ACH, that pool of money that's out there. What happens if you never import again, right? Are you allowed under some condition to get that money back? Probably not. This creates another big nasty mess that would have to be dealt with. The third would be we don't believe that the import community was harmed. We don't think that XYZ Corporation, who paid an additional $10 million in tariffs, was really harmed because they passed those tariffs on to their customers. Their customers were the injured party. So we're not
But
giving any
this
money
is
back.
but this
Go
is
ahead.
assuming it's sent to CIT, and this is basically CIT ruling. Or,
No,
or are you saying the Supreme
the
Court
Supreme
officially?
Court. The Supreme Court could
Okay.
could say these unbelievable, terrible things that give me nightmares, right? And imagine. So now I'm getting all fired up, Robert. So imagine The court says that the importers weren't injured unless they can prove that they didn't pass those tariffs on. Okay, that's a forensics exercise. My team will figure that out. But now for the people who did pass on the tariff to their customers, that means that 360 million Americans have the right to sue the government for their money back because you're saying I was the injured party. So I want Amazon to give me back the 14 cents that was paid in additional tariffs on my socks because I shouldn't have paid them. Are we going to have a class action suit for 360 million Americans to get our money back? It seems unlikely, which is why most people believe the courts will say, settle this with the importers, let the importers figure out how they're going to manage it. Because if I'm importing something that I sell to my customer and I tell them, hey, listen, Jack, I'm sorry, this went up by 50%, I got to raise it by 50%. They can work it out with me about how we do a refund. And then they can work it out with their customers, which will probably create even more lawsuits. Hallelujah, send your kid to law school. But that kind of a mess seems unlikely to occur. They don't want to create more work. They're trying to find a way to limit the work. So let's limit it by giving it back to importers.
Yeah, I mean that's that's a very obvious issue, right? I mean we've heard from many of our customers that early on when the tariffs were announced, they try to pass them on, and big retailers especially, they just weren't agreeing to it. Like
Right.
I've heard many cases where tariff went up to 46%, and then Walmart or Home Depot or somebody, they were like, nope, 10% is all you're getting. But in the end, they did get it's essentially passed on, right? So but it makes sense that the court would potentially say, all right, you guys go figure it out, because we can't, there's no, like, procedurally it's not possible to audit all of this and issue refunds to all these different parties.
That becomes a contract law question too. So I would ask the importers who are currently watching, did you have an agreement in your contract that said you would share the recovery? Was there anything that was in there? I've seen some where there were. And then suppliers too. I have a lot of clients who work something out with their suppliers. Said, you guys are going to have to take a haircut. We'll take part of it. You take part of it. So now what happens? Are the suppliers going to be asking for their money too? That's not my world, thank God. I'm just going to get you the money back. All right. You worry about how you distribute it after the fact, man. That's more work than I got to deal with.
Yeah, no, that's I mean that's it's fascinating just watching. I hope we get to watch all of this happen, because it's just, as a logistician, as a fan of the Supreme Court, and an armchair sort of fake attorney, this is all very exciting.
It is very exciting.